Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Christian with Reaper Disc, and today I want to talk about the Discraft Anax. So, the Anax is an overstable control driver, flight numbers coming in at 10603, that is, well, to be perfectly blunt and honest, it's kind of just like a more overstable Vulture. Now, I did recently review the Vulture, here on the channel. And after I threw the Anax, I was really starting to notice that, hey, maybe this thing is just like a little more beefy version of the Vulture. It has that same very similar flight path, just with a little more fade, and it still has a very similar rim feel. They felt really close, and holding the two side by side, it did feel really, really close to one another. They're both really comfortable. They both release out of the hand very well. So that was a comparison that I didn't quite expect, but was a pleasant surprise nonetheless. So jumping straight into how the Anax flies. The Anax, like I said, is an overstable control driver, meant to be able to still get pretty good distance while maintaining accuracy and controllability. When thrown on a hyzer, it did act like it wanted to start flipping up, and it maybe tried to start flipping up, but it never got all the way up to flat. It kind of rose out of the hyzer I put it on just a little bit, but then pretty quickly just started fading again. So it never quite got all the way to flat. It just, started to rise out of it a little, but then ended up just continuing to fade. Pretty reliably, I actually reshot this a few times, and they were all exactly the same. I wanted to make sure it wasn't me, and truly that was the flight of the disc, and it actually was. So it's fairly overstable. Like I said, I wasn't putting a ton of power into this. I'm trying to throw it right around like a 10 speed, or kind of like what my muscle memory says a 10 speed is, and I just couldn't quite get it to flip all the way out of it. Now, when thrown flat, it did fly straight for a majority of the flight. This is where I started noticing that it does have a good fair amount of glide to it. It was continuing to push it forward fairways down the fairway. I guess I wasn't really planning on that little play on words there, but it did. It carried it a decent amount down the fairway flat before starting to gently fade and then kind of moving into just a nice sweeping hyzer right at the end of the flight. It didn't really have any ground play on it whatsoever. It came down soft. It had just a lot of lateral movement, and it was still pushing forward instead of really dropping out and fading hard. Now, when thrown on Anheuser, it held the turnover to the apex of the flight. After it started descending, it almost immediately started trying to fight back out of it. About halfway down, it did fight all the way back to flat, and then very quickly after flexed and faded back out to the left. This has a lot of resistance to high-speed turn and a good fair amount of fades. So, it was kind of no surprise that on the way back down, it started fighting out of that Anheuser, especially as the rotation started slowing down. That low-speed stability really started kicking in and bringing it back to the left. Now, when I threw the power shot, I threw this hard. I really put some effort and some force into this shot, and it just still barely made it back up to flat. And it didn't stay flat for very long either. It got up to flat, but then it seemed like just as quickly it started fading again, and then had that same good, strong finish as what the hyzer release had. Truthfully, it really does feel and fly like a more overstable Vulture. And I know a lot of people love the way the Vulture flies, but there are some times where it's just a little too windy, or you're starting to get a lot of power on your throws where you're just like, man, I love my Vulture, I love the way it flies, but maybe for a couple shots, I want something that's going to have a little more finish, a little more wind resistance, or a little more resistance to that high-speed turn. Look no further than the Anax. This has a similar rim feel, very similar flight, just resists that high-speed turn, resists the off-axis torque, and fights the wind a little better, and has a little stronger finish. It's also a good candidate for some kind of medium power controllable forehand shots. You're not going to want to put a ton of snap onto this with a forehand, but all in all, it's still going to handle it fairly well, especially if you practice with it and get the angles down correctly. Now, me personally, I thought that this disc was going to, the way it flew, I thought it was a little closer to a 5 glide instead of a 6. And that may just be the Big Z plastic. I haven't thrown an Anax in a while, so I kind of don't really remember how like the ESP version flies, or something like that. But as is most other discs, they're also a little susceptible to variances from run to run, even in the same plastic blends. So it may have just been this blend of Big Z plastic just didn't quite glide like a 6 glide probably should. I think it's closer to a 5 really, but all in all, still the rest of the numbers lined up pretty well perfect. The Anax was really made and geared toward higher power players who need consistency and accuracy at distance, and it checks all of those boxes. It is very controllable and accurate, very point and shoot accurate, even way down the fairway. You can still pick up some good distance with this, putting a lot of power on it, and trust that you're going to maintain that fairway driver like consistency and accuracy that you need out of a true control driver. If you're wanting that type of flight in your bag, again, look no further than the Anax. If you want an Anax for yourself, click the link in the description of this video to head on over to reaperdisc.com, that way you can get one there. Drop us a comment on this video, let us know what you think about the Anax, or what you throw in its place, because I think that this flight is something that every golfer should have in their bag at all times. So if you don't throw the Anax, what do you throw for this type of shot? Drop a comment, let me know. While you're at it, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. It doesn't cost you anything, and you keep up to date with everything that we're dropping and all of our new content that we're putting out. Follow us on social media at ReaperDisc, that way you can keep up with all of our restocks and exclusive drops. And again, I'm Christian with Reaper Discs, and I'll see you guys in the next video.